Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Savvy Ladies Wednesday Wisdom webinar. I'm Maggie Montemuro, and I'm the Marketing Manager at Savvy Ladies. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the chat box. And if you're joining us by phone, email your question to info@savvyladies.org. Today's presenters are Stacy Francis and Carly Newhouse. Stacy is the founder of Savvy Ladies and the president and CEO of Francis Financial, a boutique wealth management firm. Stacy is a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst, as well as a divorce financial strategist and a certified estate and trust specialist. She is a nationally recognized financial expert with over 18 years of experience in the financial industry. Stacy is the director of the Association of Divorce Financial Planners Greater New York Metro Chapter and part of the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors and the Financial Planning Association. Carly is a licensed master social worker and a bereavement specialist and grief counselor. Through her work as a pediatric social worker at Mount Sinai Hospital and bereavement group facilitator at A Caring Hand, Carly has counseled pregnant individuals and couples, parents, siblings, and school communities of critically ill and deceased children on how to effectively process grief and loss. Carly also offers bereavement workshops and staff debriefings to organizations as a means of supporting and unifying staff to deliver the finest services to clients while being mindful of their own needs. Thanks for being with us today, Stacy and Carly, and let's get started.
Thank you so much, Maggie. We're going to go ahead and get started, and we're going to talk first about the emotional and financial challenges of divorce. And the first piece that a lot of people don't realize is that divorce is definitely a union of love, but it's also an economic union. In fact, there's no more fully documented union, economic union, other than marriage. And this is something that we often forget, that there's, of course, the emotional piece of separating, which is so traumatic, but it's also the financial piece that you have to think about.
In today's training, we hope to cover three main points. We want to provide you with tools to navigate the emotional effects of divorce in a way that's culturally competent. We want to give you an education on the important financial steps to take to best protect yourself and your family. And we also want to provide you with effective resources to support you during this difficult time. At the end of the presentation, we have a bunch of resource slides, so hopefully that will be a great takeaway.
And when we talk about women in general and divorce, the biggest piece we have to understand is that understanding your money, getting control of your money is not an option. It's something you have to do. And for women who don't do that, the circumstances are absolutely dire. In fact, about 20% of divorced women age 65 or older live in poverty. Women who are divorced are having to make ends meet on lower incomes and unfortunately resulting higher poverty rates. And many women have not been able to take control of their finances, even when they're on their own. Many women, when they are married, rely on their husband to make those most important financial decisions throughout the entire marriage. And they find themselves lost when they're forced to be doing this on their own. So they find themselves alone and with their money and lacking confidence and also financial knowledge that is, to be honest, the most important timing to have. When you are getting divorced is the time when you need to know the most about your money, because during this time and after, you're making decisions that are going to affect the rest of your entire life. They're going to affect the rest of your entire financial security.
Divorce can truly feel like a death. It rocks every aspect of your life, from your emotional vision of your life to the practical and of course to the financial. You're mourning multiple deaths at the same time. The death of yourself as part of that couple, the death of you and your partner, and the death of the life you built and shared together. Whether it was a sudden divorce or something that was expected over years and years, it's still just as painful. And so the important thing is to balance not making major decisions while in the thick of grief with refusing to put off important financial and practical decisions because of a lack of confidence, either because you used to rely on your spouse for that, or because you just feel so emotionally shaken that you don't know how to proceed. Through action, you will grow, your confidence will grow. And concentration and organization are notoriously difficult during times of grief, especially in the initial stages. So do things that are helpful, like write things down as much as possible, set up automatic payments, and reach out strategically for support, which we'll discuss a little bit more in depth later.
So have you ever wanted to know what the woman sitting across from you is thinking on the subway? Especially if she's dealing with a similar situation to you, maybe going through divorce or finding herself on her own? Well, we always wanted to know that as well. And we created a fantastic research paper after interviewing over 150 women about their experiences going through the divorce process, their life before, and also now their life after. And what we're going to be doing is going through and telling you a little bit about what were the results of this. And you'll see that some of these results you may see yourself in. And you're most likely going to also identify with a lot of the concerns and experiences of these women. So in total, we had 122 women. The median age was 44. 84% are finished with their divorce. So you can see that about 16% are still going through the process. And most of them have children. 86% of the women actually have kids that they are taking care of as well. The median age median duration of the marriage was about 7 to 10 years, so a pretty long marriage. And the length of the divorce was about 1 year or less. This also picture shows you the different states that were represented. And the dark teal color shows you all of the states across the US. What we did find is that marriages with high net worth tended to take much longer than that 1 year time period too. If you're looking at that 1 year kind of shaking your head, we found that people with significant amount of assets, that it typically took a little longer. So those participants, 88% are employed either part-time or full-time. Many of them did not work previously and found themselves in need of getting a position and starting a career after their marriage. A total of 68% have household income of $75,000 or more a year. That also includes their child support as well as their alimony or maintenance, what we call it here in New York. This is an interesting number here. 53% have a net worth of $500,000 or more. So relatively, the majority of these women are what we would consider high net worth. But guess what? It doesn't mean being necessarily high net worth means equally that you know and you feel financially secure. In fact, only 33% of those women feel financially secure. 22%, a number even lower, feel like they save enough. So we have the broad majority of these women not feeling financially secure and not saving enough. A large number thinks budgeting is important, but I was surprised by this one because maybe it's because I'm biased and I'm a financial planner. I think everybody should think budgeting is important, but you can see only about half of the women think budgeting is important. And anyways, if there's any takeaway from our webinar today, please be part of that 55% that thinks budgeting is important, because that is really key, especially when you're dealing with finite money and money that has to last you for the rest of your life. Overall, most of the women were active in bill paying, saving, and investing. So about half of the women helped make long-term decisions in their marriage for investing, which is good. That number is actually higher than I've seen other statistics. But as far as the women that did this alone in their marriage, that were fully responsible for all of those decisions, you can see that those numbers really drop significantly. So only 25% of the women, 25% of the time, the woman alone was responsible for investing. 30% of the time, the woman alone was responsible for saving. And the same thing with bills. About 39% of the time, the woman alone was responsible for paying bills. What's interesting is that almost half of the women said that they were most satisfied with their money situation during their marriage. But you have to look at the other end. The other 50% said that they were more satisfied with their money situation either before they got married, before they met him, or now once they've gotten rid of him. So this is interesting. And we dug into that a little bit more to try and understand what that meant. And really, part of the reason why women are more confident in and actually happier with their money situation after the divorce is because they've been forced to get in control of their money. They've been forced to learn about their money, which is a good thing. So what were our findings? Well, most of the divorces are actually being filed in March. We now are calling that the unofficial divorce month. Women are much more likely to ask for a divorce than men. In fact, 60% of all of the divorces were initiated and filed by women. Another big takeaway that really rocked and really made us very concerned is that only 25% of the women we spoke to believe that they can maintain their current lifestyle in retirement. So this is their biggest concern. And 77% of that women feel like they don't save enough. And only 33% feel financially secure. So this is a really big issue. The financial impact of divorce is a really big issue. And the worries are significant. In fact, money was one of the biggest worries during their marriage. And the topping the list was feeling that your husband's spending was out of control and not having control over what he was doing. Another worry was paying bills and dealing with credit card debt. And this was a lot of the anxiety and frustrations that occurred and in many cases helped lead towards divorce after all. The women put in order of importance what their worries were with the divorce, looking at all different things such as where they were going to be living, insurance issues, their career, social issues, having to navigate once you were a couple and now you're not, and navigating that. But the number one biggest concern, even more so than fear for their children, was money. That surprised us. I expected it to be children first, but what the concern was money was the most important concern because they also knew they needed that money to take care of their kids. So money, again, as we say, is such an important part of divorce, and getting control of your financial situation is not an option. It's really a necessity.
So amidst all of this change, it's really common to feel a range of reactions. And I think especially in today's culture, we expect quick results to get over things quickly, or for someone to behave in a typical way. We're the Facebook generation where we see people smiling the day after filing. So I wanted to go through a range of common reactions to normalize all of these reactions. Anger is a big one that a lot of people kind of expect, but anger can find many outlets. And so it's not just necessarily anger towards one's ex-partner. It could be anger towards friends or family for not assisting, could be anger at oneself, turned inward. Anxiety and fear are big. Stacy just went over the top 6 areas of concern. So money, children, those are all big stressors. And there's very real grief, as we were discussing. You're grieving a major loss in your life. Some people feel shame, especially as related to perhaps religious beliefs or cultural values. A lot of people, at least initially, feel extremely numb. They withdraw, they feel flat. Things are just moving in hyperspeed and they feel like they can't actually connect to what they're feeling. That's very, very common as well. That will abate over time, but just give your brain some time to adjust to this reality. Somatic, meaning physical complaints, are also very, very common. Stomach aches, headaches, all of that is the way that you are holding in stress is expressing itself in your body. The first thing to do is always get checked out by a medical doctor to make sure that these somatic complaints are actually not physically or biologically based. And after that, assuming that you've heard from the doctor that there is nothing physically wrong with you, that's the time to really notice that you need to reach out for different forms of support that we're going to go over. A lot of times people feel relieved to be out of a situation that perhaps for some time they did not feel was right for them. And then there's the accompanying poor sleep, appetite, concentration. So all that is common. There are steps that you can take to try to normalize that, and that's staying on a routine, which I'll discuss a little bit more later. But specifically with concentration, noticing that that's something that might not be your strong suit at the moment, and taking notes as much as possible, setting up autoplay, doing those things that we talked about a little bit. The important thing to remember is there's no wrong reaction. Everyone's experience is unique and dependent on numerous psychological and social factors. It depends on how much support you have. It depends if this was a shock. It depends also what your financial situation is, how comfortable you feel becoming independent in terms of finances. Some feelings might pass quickly, especially the numbness, withdrawal, flatness, but others may linger for some time. Grieving, unfortunately, is not a linear process, so there's no timeline. I know a lot of people think, okay, I'm going to give myself 3 months and then I'll be back to my old self. It generally doesn't work that way, but the more support and resources you have at your fingertips, the better this process will go for you. And there's also a very big difference between grief and depression. So they can feel similar, but with depression, you feel completely hopeless and helpless. You cannot see out a time that you will feel differently. Whereas with grief, the feelings are quite acute and painful, but there is a way you see a future time when you will not be experiencing these feelings at this quite acute level. Any and all feelings, again, are normal and okay, any of these lists that we went over, unless you feel like you are not able to fulfill any of your responsibilities or seriously considering hurting yourself or someone else. If that thought crosses your mind and you know you won't act on it, that's a natural thing. But if these thoughts keep flooding you, or you're actually thinking of a plan, then you need to call 911 immediately or go to your local hospital emergency room. Warning signs for you to look out for yourself and your children are drug or alcohol abuse, self-injury, cutting, harming yourself in any other way, frequent violent outbursts, and complete withdrawal.
So I really appreciate it. And I think what's interesting, what you mentioned, Carly, is not giving yourself a timeline. I think that's so wise because we tend to do that. We tend to break this up and say, okay, we're gonna be sad for 3 months, and I'll give myself permission to do that, and thinking that everything's gonna be okay after that. And it's just not. And I imagine too that some people find themselves doing well for a while and then kind of regressing and coming back. And is that normal too?
Yes. So when I say grief is not a linear process, it means that there are peaks and valleys. And I think intellectually, we think if we give ourselves a timeline of 3 months, it helps us process the grief initially, and that's okay. But just reminding yourself that it really is a non-linear process, that you might need to reach out for help 6 months down the line more so than you do the first 3 weeks, and that's okay, and that's something to expect, and that's something that you should tell your support circle as well as something they should be able to anticipate.
So what are some of the support systems that women use? We interviewed the ladies, and they found that their number one source of support was really their friends and family, not to be surprised. And 88% of the women actually said that's where they received most of their support. Other areas that were very helpful, and I know Carly will agree with this too, is working with a psychologist, a therapist, a social worker, also community and religious groups. And groups are fabulous for women. I have been able to attend a few groups for women going through divorce. A great resource is Untied, and just seeing the connection that these women have and the support that is just immediately built between them is really powerful, really powerful. Divorce groups, also divorce coaches. And it's interesting, a lot of women that we interviewed hadn't heard about divorce coaches, and this is a newer type of support system, and we recommend all of our clients that are going through divorce to work with a divorce coach. In fact, We often pay for their first couple sessions because we believe it's so helpful. And this is someone who is there for you, that is your cheerleader, and also helps you understand the process and helps you make really sound decisions throughout the process, which a social worker can definitely help you in many areas. But this is someone that could also be helpful, particularly if divorce is a new piece for you, you've never gone through divorce before. Again, it's kind of a guide. So did women feel like they had enough support? A good number did, 62% did. But what's interesting, 38%, that means 38% of women didn't. In fact, this number here, 11% felt like they were completely on their own and they had no support whatsoever. So if you do have a friend who is going through a divorce and really is struggling, one of the best things you can do, instead of buying her jewelry or something, or a handbag, maybe helping and doing some research, or we'll give you some resources at the end too, but maybe accompanying her to a divorce group or introducing her to a divorce coach that you might know, or encouraging her to reach out to a social worker, because we want to see that 100% of the women felt like they had enough support, because this is such a difficult, traumatic process.
So whether you feel like you have enough support or not, a lot of women initially are nervous about reaching out and asking for help. Some people might feel comfortable asking for help from a strategic family member with one type of help that they might need, like cooking help, for example, but they don't feel comfortable asking for financial help. And so that's why we really promote a combination of personal and professional help. And there's a strategic way to put together a divorce support team. So you really want to make sure that you have at least one person in each of these three categories. So listeners, that's very important. They offer emotional support. They're there for you. They're there to listen, to normalize, to validate, and to help you think through the initial phase of strong emotions and really get to what's in your best interest. These can be personal friends or professionals such as a social worker, a psychologist, a psychiatrist. Then you want the doers. They offer practical support. So this again could be a divorce coach, a divorce group, or somebody in your life who gets things done, who's very organized. They might help you go through your financial documents. They might help you move. They might help pick up your children from school. So all these practical tasks, it's very important to have a doer in your corner. And then there's the distractors. So there's a lot to do when you're getting divorced, both in terms of organizing yourself financially, practical moves, and also emotionally balancing all of these new feelings. But it's important to have fun and make sure that every day you're integrating some things that make you feel really alive and like you're taking care of yourself. So whether that's a friend who will accompany you to a gym class, or a divorce group where you can meet women with different hobbies and try to become a part of that group, that's really important. If your support circle seems bare, which 11% of these women felt that they have no support, it's important to really consider ways to grow your support system in one or all three of these specific strategic areas. Often overlooked sources of support include relatives, neighbors, teachers, coaches, coworkers, and even pets. Pets can offer a great distraction and also support. And so I think a lot of people in the initial phase feel like, I have nobody, that's it. It's important to expand your mind, and as a friend or a family member of somebody navigating divorce, you can try to process who's available to them. A coach who really helps your child gain confidence in their whatever skill they're working on together, that is a major support, and it's important not to overlook those people. Another important means of support is a divorce mentor. So that can be somebody who either has gone through the process of divorce or somebody who is just currently single and can help you construct a new independent identity. And now a lot of people end up feeling quite indebted or maybe overly fused with their divorce mentors or their divorce support systems. So that can happen. It's important to talk about boundary issues as they come up, because of course you're sharing your most intimate details with these people. So in response to any question you feel like is too personal or painful for you to address, it's perfectly reasonable to say something like, "You're so thoughtful to ask about that. I'm just really not ready to talk about that yet, but the moment I feel comfortable, I so appreciate that you're there for me." The other piece of the emotional support tools is engaging professional help. So a therapist, which can be a social worker or a psychologist, a psychiatrist, which is a medical doctor who can prescribe medication, a financial advisor like Stacy, divorce coaches, as Stacy mentioned, and other financial experts and practical experts such as movers, designers, whoever you feel like would really act as a major support. So all these players are key to help you navigate these next steps. And later on in the presentation, as I said, we'll give you a list of different helpful resources.
So when we talk about support, and Carly did a great job of breaking it up into, the listeners, the doers, and the distractors. What's interesting, a lot of people said that they needed definitely more help on the doer part. And one of the women actually had a fantastic quote that she gave us permission to share, that she wished that her friends had reached out to assist her more with like the everyday stuff, the moving, picking up kids, daily tasks that are so much more difficult to manage when you become a single parent, especially if you have primary custody. Wow, all of a sudden you feel like you're in this on your own, and somehow you have to now manage the kids all on your own. It can be very, very overwhelming. So that's definitely great that you brought that up, Carly, because I think the doer is something that can't be stressed enough, having that doer, that person that you reach out to.
And the doer can be a neighbor, somebody from school. It doesn't have to be somebody who you feel deeply emotionally entwined with. It's just somebody who can kind of help out with those practical things, and it's often not a major burden for that other person.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that we heard from individuals is that they needed more help understanding the legal process, especially if you've not gone through a divorce previously. And myself, in learning about the divorce process legally, I have to tell you, it's very overwhelming. They do not write things in what we would consider plain English. It's what I call legalese. And it's very, very difficult to have a real good explanation of the legal process and to know what to expect. That's why you do want to make sure that you are hiring the right professionals in your life, that you are working with an attorney or mediator that is going to take the time to educate you so that you feel more comfortable, more confident in knowing what to expect. For some people, that's part of their attorney may not be that type of a person, but they've hired their attorney for the reasons of maybe they are a bulldog, and unfortunately, because they have an uncooperative spouse, that's really needed. So they're not getting their emotional support from their attorney, which is important not to do that. But they're then hiring maybe a divorce coach or someone outside, or being part of a divorce group or a circle, a networking circle for women going through divorce. But you can't go it alone, because you do need to understand the legal process. And that was another thing that we heard from, as I mentioned, quite a few women, that they felt like they just didn't get enough support there.
So besides for reaching out to the appropriate individuals, how do you make your everyday manageable, especially in the beginning? So routine, routine, routine. I really can't stress it enough. Having healthy, manageable routines just makes your day feel more manageable. So set sleep and wake times. I don't mean minute to minute, but generally around the same time. We all know how crabby we can get when we're tired. So taking that barrier off the table is quite helpful. Regular exercise, that doesn't mean if you're somebody who hasn't exercised that you sign up for a marathon 3 months later. It just means taking a walk down the block, scheduling in some time, healthy activities like yoga, meditation, stretching. Those can really help just completely transform your mindset in those moments. And a consistent and mostly healthful diet. Ice cream solves a lot of different things, but it needs to be in moderation. Routines help keep you on track, and they just make you feel safe. they become so second nature that you really can go on autopilot, freeing up space in your brain for you to focus on the other challenges. So it's really key to get into a routine, and that's both key for yourself and for your children, which I'll discuss in a little bit more depth later. Now, with all these new challenges, both emotional, practical, and financial, it's important to balance scheduling all these activities to create new rituals for yourself and your family, while also leaving yourself some time to breathe and grieve, right? So that might mean in between dropping your kids off from school and running to work, you take 10 minutes in the car to just breathe. Or it might mean writing to-do lists every morning to know what are your key items to focus on today. And all these tools are helpful in general, but specifically during the stresses of an imminent divorce or a divorce that's finally come to a conclusion. So setting short, intermediate, and long-term goals with concurrent timeframes is so key to help you feel organized. So that means writing it down, making it very visual for yourself. It might be putting it on your fridge, it might be keeping it in your drawer. And these goals can be as small or as large as you want them to be. So a short-term goal might be collecting all of your bank information from one particular bank. An intermediate goal might be meeting with your divorce lawyer and really being honest about your lack of knowledge or your questions. And a long-term goal could be starting a new relationship or becoming more financially invested in certain types of stocks or bonds or whatever forms your long-term goals take. It's so important to put timeframes on these goals, otherwise they get hazy and it's very hard to hold yourself accountable. And setting the goals will help you feel organized and in control during this time when you so often will feel out of control and confused. So that's a great way to help you regain that power. And celebrating every accomplishment, no matter how small, with a celebration ritual, whether it's a little celebration dance or taking the kids out for a spin on their bikes or letting yourself watch that half-hour TV show that you've been waiting for all day. Have a ritual to celebrate just as you have rituals to maintain your health.
So I went and celebrated yesterday because I got some MRI results, and the results of the MRI were absolutely fantastic. And my way of celebrating, and I hope no one looks down on me, I buy Star magazine.
I see it right behind us right now.
Yeah, so the proof is here. It's out. But when I want to celebrate, I do that because number one, it makes me feel so darn normal because my life is nowhere near Star magazine quality. But also it's something I normally do for myself. So, and that's actually something that you'll want to do too, to keep yourself, as you're, continuing to go down this path and, collecting things, particularly collecting financial things. A lot of people would rather clean the toilet than have to talk about finances. So set up little, congratulations, because you need to start this checklist, and it may seem overwhelming, but the most important thing is getting a clear picture of where you are financially. So that means your cash flow needs. So how much money are you spending? I know it's painful, but going back and looking at your credit card statements and your ATM withdrawals and the checks that you write is key. That is key. If you don't know how much you spend down to the penny on a monthly basis, you're making a big mistake. You also need to understand your assets. And when I say assets, I'm not just talking about what's in your bank account. I'm also talking about any restricted stock that you may have or your husband may have, stock options, retirement plans at work. And there are some individuals that might have more than one retirement plan at work, particularly if they are working for the government or a teacher. That's something really important to understand. If there's a business, understanding the value of the business, understanding the value of all your real estate. So that is your primary home, if you have a vacation home, even if you have a timeshare, these are all assets, and you have to understand what the value of them are. And then, of course, the debts. What debts do you have? I would definitely encourage you to go to annualcreditreport.com to look and see if there have been any debts taken out in your name. Unfortunately, we have seen this happen where you will all of a sudden find yourself that there is a home equity line of credit for $300,000 and every penny has been used without your knowledge. Can that happen? Yes. Is it legal? No. Does it happen? Unfortunately, yes. So you need to understand where you are. Also, all your insurances. Do you have life insurance? Does he have life insurance? What's your disability insurance? All of that is also really key. Start to collect all of those pieces and put them together. And that checklist is going to help you big time, because it's going to help you from making financial mistakes. The top 4 financial mistakes we see is talking about the financial settlement before child custody. I know that there are times when you don't have the option necessarily and need to look at child custody first, but often we find women being held ransom, their children being held ransom by their husband, saying that if I don't get this amount of custody or this amount of visitation, then I'm not giving you half of the assets. Know that that is inappropriate. That is not something that is allowed, and therefore it's often best to figure out the financial piece first and then talk about the children, so that no one can try to bully anyone. Understanding cost basis. Cost basis is a term that most people don't know, but it's actually really important. $1 in your checking account, if you took it out to use it and spend it, you're going to have $1. But $1 in your brokerage account that's invested in Google stock, that's been invested for 5 years, that dollar, after you take it out and pay taxes and then use it to pay your rent, you might only get 80 cents, depending on the gains that you're going to have to pay. So it's very important to understand that not all assets are the same. Same thing, $1 in your retirement plan is going to be very different, because that dollar, when you take it out, it's like it comes to you in your paycheck. You have to pay state taxes, local taxes, federal taxes, Social Security, and Medicare. So say goodbye to 40 cents of that $1. So don't give him the $500,000 checking account and you take the $500,000 retirement account, because you can see that's not an apples to apples exchange. The next mistake we see is deciding the financial issues once at a time. You really want to be able to have the entire picture and make decisions at that time. Knowing the entire picture is important. Then you saying, okay, fine, I'll take the house, you take the $1 million bank account. You could find that you can't afford the house in reality, and you just made a big mistake. So taking a look at all of the issues together is very important. And then failing to address debt. Just as you divide assets, which sounds much more exciting, well, you also have to divide debt. And we just had a situation where a client worked with an attorney that we don't unfortunately recommend, and they ended up continuing to work with this attorney because they were very inexpensive. Well, in the divorce agreement, it was said that the husband needs to pay off this $75,000 line of credit. Unfortunately, the wife's name is on the line of credit. What's ending up happening is that the husband is declaring bankruptcy. He is not going to be making that payment, paying off the line of credit, and the line of credit is in her name. So even though the divorce agreement says that he has to pay that, the line of credit folks don't care, and she is liable. So there are mistakes that you don't want to make, and understanding debt, how it's titled, who's paying off what, is really key. Another area that we see, keeping all the homes, just like I mentioned, you may not be able to afford it, and that emotion of wanting to stay in the home, particularly if you have young children, can actually devastate you financially for the long run. There's also a lot of tax havens for divorced couples. For example, if you're receiving alimony and you're at a very low tax bracket and your husband's at a very high tax bracket, the amount of money that you have after his deduction and you paying tax at a lower rate is actually more. So trying to find that sweet spot where you can take advantage of the tax code. Believing the lawyer knows best. The example I just explained about the debt, The lawyer said, don't worry, he's going to pay it. It's in the divorce agreement. Lawyers are not infallible, nor are financial planners. So you need to make sure, just as if you were going in for open heart surgery, you get a second opinion if you feel like something's not 100% comfortable with it. You need to do that too. This is your life that you're planning and not planning. A lot of people just kind of go through and they just want to rush to the end because it is so painful to be through this process. But it really is important to plan, because this time really impacts you for the rest of your life and your children.
And speaking of children, as you might remember from Stacy's research, 86% of the women surveyed had children. It was the second biggest concern cited during the divorce. And while money was the first concern, as Stacy explained, a lot of that might have been related to being able to financially afford caring for your children. So a lot of people try to avoid telling their children, thinking that it'll be too painful, or that they won't find the right words, or that they're too much of a mess, that they can barely hold it together for themselves. How can they assert themselves in this kind of conversation? That's completely understandable, but it's one of the biggest mistakes. Children know what's going on, whether they know the actual facts or they can just sense that something's not right, something's changing. The longer it takes for you to address it, the more unsafe, confused, and scared they will likely feel. So prepare yourself to talk to your children and do it as soon as possible. You don't need to tell them, that you have come to any major decisions if that's not the stage that you're in, but you do want to address what's happening around them. So before sitting down with your kids, whether you can do this with your ex-partner, which would be ideal, or with a trusted friend or family member, sit down and really think through, what do you want to share, what ways do you want to share it, and anticipate any of their questions. So you want to address your own anxiety around this talk. It can definitely be scary. A lot of people feel shame or fear that they're letting down their children, and that's okay. Those are things that you can share in a developmentally appropriate way with your child. You can say, I'm so sorry that this is changing, your life in a way that maybe you're not so happy with, but we're going to find a new happy place as a family. You don't need to pretend to be Superwoman. It's okay if your kids see you crying or see you in pain. Verbalize that you are in pain and this is a difficult time for everybody, but that you will get through it, as will they, together as a family. If possible, make sure you and your ex-partner are providing them with consistent information. It can be very confusing for children if one parent says, mommy and daddy are just fighting right now, but we're going to get through this, and the other parent is saying, daddy's going to move out at the end of the month. So if you unfortunately are in a relationship where you can't have open lines of communication, then perhaps have a mediator present to help you guys address this as a family, because your kids, it would be important for them to see a united front if possible. Talking about what's happening to your kids makes them feel supported, loved, and safe to share their conflicting emotions. So you want to encourage them to ask questions, and that's not just in the initial discussions, but checking in a day later, even that evening, saying, hey, I know that was a pretty heavy conversation, huh? What questions do you have? Because I have so many different thoughts swirling around in my mind. You want to be honest with them, but again, in a developmentally appropriate way, which I'm going to go through a little bit later. And you want to acknowledge that they likely have a mix of feelings, and even throwing out some feelings is really helpful. So saying, you might feel angry, you might feel scared, or you might feel totally confused. I feel a lot of those feelings too, and that's okay. We should all talk about those feelings because those will change. We might have some other feelings that we don't love, and we might have some better feelings in a few days. So let's just keep on talking about that. And key is to reassure your children that there was nothing that they didn't do, or could have done that had any role in your choice to divorce or separate, whatever stage you're in. Especially with younger children, a lot of times they tend to take on this responsibility and they create a false story that somehow them not going to bed on time that night led to this major divorce. So you want to make sure that they are not left with that impression, or that that's not clearly, concretely stated. So a lot of people don't even know where to start. with this conversation. So again, this is after you've thought it through, prepared yourself, hopefully talked to your former partner about what information you want to share. Some general language you can use is saying, mommy and daddy don't make each other happy anymore. But while parents can sometimes decide not to love each other or live together, parents and kids can never get divorced. And saying that to young kids is really, really helpful. Of course, when you're talking to teens, they probably have a vision of divorce already in their mind. They probably were more aware of what was going on and what the potential consequence of that would be. So you would want to change this language accordingly. So you want to acknowledge some of the changes in their life, whether that be that they are going to be moving, changing schools, doing different activities, or there are things that you don't know about. You could say, we're not sure if we're going to stay in this house, but what we are sure about is that we will have the same bedtime routine, we will have the same rules about finishing your vegetables or being nice to your brothers and sisters, and remind them that we'll always maintain that what will always stay consistent is your presence and ability to care and support them. Hopefully both parents are able to do that, and if that's the case, then please also speak for your spouse at that time, saying mommy and daddy will always be here for you, love you, help you. But if that's not the case, then just speak from your own perspective. As I said before about the importance of routines for you, it's the same for your kids, especially in these initial stages when your kids feel like they have very little power or say over what's going on. Keeping their routines is key, and it helps them, again, feel centered. So part of these routines are rules, rewards, and enforcing limits. This is not the time to give into Candyland all the time. This is not the time to say homework can fall by the wayside. This is really the time to maintain routine. I know it can seem alluring to try to be that fun parent when you see your kids sad and wanting to give them those extra treats, but it's actually not in their best interest, and it's not in your best interest either. It actually increases their sense of guilt or anxiety, because then they're wondering, how long is this going to last? What are the new expectations of me? So you don't want to change the game more than it already is. Again, consistently reminding them of your ongoing love and support. If your partner is not going to be available and present, you don't have to speak for him, but just saying mommy loves you and will always take care of you. We know some things will be different, like maybe your school district or your bus schedule, but our love for you will never change, and reminding them that you'll deal with each change together as a family, that you are still a family even though the configuration of that might look different. And so I mentioned that wonky term developmentally appropriate a bunch of times now, so I want to really dig into what that actually means. So this is a table that marks a general developmental curve. It does not fit every child. It's important to take developmental delays into account when deciding what is and is not developmentally appropriate for your child. Remember, you are the expert on your child. You know what your child can handle and what they can't. It's more crucial to consider their developmental stage versus their developmental age. So if you have an 8-year-old who's already reading at a high school level and who asks really profound, deep questions, then you'd want to maybe talk to them in a different way than you would an 8-year-old who's more at grade level. And for your younger kids, they have a limited understanding. So they might view divorce as temporary, reversible, or they might falsely believe that something completely unrelated caused a divorce, like not going to bed on time or not doing their homework. So you want to really be concrete and say, this is not because of anything you did. Sometimes kids think that and really normalize that sometimes a lot of kids do think that, but that's not the case, and that if they ever have questions about that or thoughts about that, you want them to bring those to you and you'll talk about them. And you can say, this divorce is permanent. This is what's going to be happening for our family right now. I can't say for the future, but we have to all expect that this is going to be permanent. So you want to use, again, really concrete language. You also want to play, so using dolls or other toys to help them understand maybe that their house is going to change and the ways that it will actually look. Taking them on tours of their new house or their new school is really helpful so that they can visually know what to expect. Our older kids, 8 to 12, so they're able to identify and process feelings at a higher level, and they'll likely have a lot of specific questions. You know your kid best. If your kid's somebody who asks a ton of detailed questions, prepare some answers, and then you can also say for some, I'm not sure right now, or that's something that mommy and daddy are going to work at. That's not something you have to worry about. So using books, art, if your child loves drawing, music, journaling, and play is really helpful for kids at this stage as well. And then for our teens, they demonstrate similar feelings, reactions, and experiences to you, but their development is not the same as an adult. So they are much more impulsive. They tend to not be able to control their feelings quite as well. So you can expect more outbursts or more extremes of emotion, and you can really normalize and validate that. That's hormonal and developmental. Their brains have not fully developed, even though they might think they have. A lot of teens want to receive honest information. This reinforces trust. So if you gloss over something that they can clearly feel is not accurate, then you're going to lose that sense of trust with them. It's very, very important to remember that it's totally appropriate and healthy for your teens to reach out to others for support at this stage. So if they feel more comfortable going to their friends or a trusted teacher or coach, then that's not saying anything negative about your parenting. That's saying that they're developing an independent identity, as they should at this stage. Co-parenting. So the dream is that you guys will be able to co-parent and you will get into a healthy, happy routine, but that's not always the case. Sometimes co-parenting is not possible. If unfortunately that's the case, then you'd want to find other people to fill in that other role of parent to both help you and also to help your child feel supported. So teachers, coaches, neighbors, family, friends, godmothers, godfathers, all those people can really be pulled into the family system so that your children feel like they have still multiple supports. So you want to collectively focus on what's best for your children. That might be a way for you and your ex-spouse to really bond and move forward in terms of creating a new routine for your newly configured family. Ideally, again, you're going to prepare before you have conversations with your spouse. There are a lot of things that can feel heated, everything from finances to custody to rules at home that you and your spouse might not agree on. So you want to really prepare and notice what things you're willing to give a little bit on and what things you're not. No matter how difficult it is for you to communicate, never, never, never put your children in the role of messenger. So thank God we have technology these days. You can text, you can email, you can send messages through other people. You do not want to put your children in that role. It makes them feel extremely uncomfortable and confused and scared. At the same time, you want to make a concerted effort not to speak negatively about your spouse to or in front of children. A lot of parents think if they're on the phone and their kids are watching TV that the kids can't hear. They can. Kids are hyper aware and they're looking for any chink in that armor to help understand who's at fault here and how to behave towards both parents. So you want to find another audience. I don't care if that's a journal, if it's a coworker, family, or friend. Make sure it's out of your children's earshot. And I know that's much easier to say than actually do, but it's so, so key. Now here are some therapeutic resources for you to use for yourself and your children. So the first is finding a trusted therapist. Whether you want to go onto your insurance company's website and search by your area, or you want to ask for referrals from a friend who's gone through a divorce, or just somebody who has a therapist that they trust, that's a great place to start. But there's also Psychology Today, which helps you locate therapists by specialty, location, and accepting insurance. I would always call these people. You can get a sense on the phone whether you feel comfortable with somebody or not. And most people offer the first session free so that you can tell if you're a good match. It's almost like a marriage, so you want to make sure that you're with somebody who you feel comfortable with. And if not, that just means that you move on to the next person. Guided meditation is a free and easy way to help yourself relax. This link is just a 5-minute meditation. There are many longer ones, but telling yourself that it's only 5 minutes that you want to do maybe when you first wake up and before bed really helps set your day. Then, since we know so many people are really concerned about providing for their children at this stage, Banana Splits is a school-based children's support group. It's for kids that are going through divorce or whose parents have already divorced. It's a really nice way for children to bond, especially if they're in a new school. So you'd want to ask your child's teacher or school administrator about enrolling your child in banana splits. And if the school doesn't have a chapter, then you would want to talk to a school administrator about starting one. I can't imagine in today's culture that your child is the only one who could benefit from that group. And then you want to do have general site specific information. So Google can be your best friend or your worst enemy. And that's why NOLO, here's the link, is reputable general information, including information about no-fault divorce, division of assets, alimony, and also some psychological aspects of divorce. So that's a great starting point. Then here's a list of books that you can read, and also your children. Books are great. It helps kids realize that they are not the only person experiencing this. It helps them kind of verbalize some of their own thoughts and feelings in a way that's safe. And it can be a new bonding ritual for you to do with your children.
So there's also some fantastic resources for you, specifically in helping you bond with other women. Untied is a fantastic organization that is here in New York, and they have also, if you go on their website, articles, videos, tips, anything you can imagine. Divorce coaches, we talked about. SAS for Women is a fantastic resource. Divorcierge, it's actually it's similar to concierge, but helping women through the process, and men as well, through divorce. So these are some great resources for you too. Familykind is a personal favorite of mine. They help women and children, parents dealing with separation and divorce. They offer low-cost counseling, also low-cost legal help. And then Split, it's a fantastic film that you could watch with your kids. It's appropriate for children age 6 to 12, and it helps helps kids learn about the different process pieces of divorce, and it helps you as a parent better understand the impact of divorce on your children, even if they're not really ready to talk about it themselves. So we actually included a trailer to that as well. Any questions? So I know we've run over a little bit, but I have to say, of all the topics to run over, this is the right one because there is so much information. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask now, but we also will be sure to give you our information, and you can contact me at stacy@francisfinancial.com, and also Carly was kind enough to give you her information of newhouse.carly@gmail.com. You can visit our LinkedIn. We've also given you each of our websites so that you can reach out to us as well to support you through this process. So thank you. I also want to say a great big thank you to Carly, and she spent a huge amount of time and thought and and just love that went into this presentation. And so I really want to thank her, because when you think of a grief counselor, many people think again of death, but it's a death of a marriage. And so you have to be patient with yourself and caring. How would you treat your best friend going through this trauma? Make sure you think about that when you are treating yourself too. It's really important to understand kind of the takeaways I have of getting control of your finances so that you can feel comfortable financially for the rest of your life, but then also giving yourself time to heal, because it is unfortunately going to be a process of healing as well.
Thank you, Stacy, for having me, and all of you for listening. Please feel free to reach out with any follow-up questions or resources.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy and Carly. I just want to thank everyone who joined us today. And if you have questions, you can contact Savvy Ladies, or you can contact Stacy or Carly. I see we're about out of time, so I just want to thank you again for a great presentation today.
Thank you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Bye-bye.